perfect and spreadable right out of the fridge, and it's super tasty. So thank you guys for hanging out with me here. Let's go ahead and get to making some butter mayonnaise. Okay folks, so what I've got, I have one stick of butter that I've unwrapped and put in this just glass container. I'm just gonna stick it in the microwave. Hands are clean, so don't anybody freak out about anything like that. The butter is gonna go in the microwave. I'm gonna put it in there for 1 minute. It is going to be very bubbly and foamy. It's gonna be hot because it's gonna basically be boiling. That's okay, and I'm gonna show you why in just a minute. So I'm gonna go ahead and put that in the microwave over here, just for 1 minute. I found with my microwave, 1 minute melts it all the way down. There's no little lumps left, and then it lets me do this next step very easily. So I'm just gonna grab a bowl so I can separate one of my eggs here. Now, some people really freak out about raw egg. You can get pasteurized eggs and egg products and stuff. I don't really worry about it. As long as the egg looks good and smells good when I open it, I'm not concerned. If you want to be a little extra careful, crack it on a flat surface instead of, say, the edge of the bowl, because that doesn't push any of the shards of shell into the egg. So that way, if there's any bacteria, anything on the outside, it doesn't contaminate the egg. So all I'm going to do is separate this, and I'm going to put the white into the bowl here, and I'm going to put the yolk into our container to make the mayonnaise. Don't throw out the white. We're going to need it. Okay, so we're just going to crack it. My butter should be done now. Okay, and I just go back and forth a couple of times. Some people like to do this with their fingers because they say that way they don't get any potential contamination. That's cool. However you like to separate eggs, I think it's great. So we've got our yolk in our container there, and our butter. And it's nice and melted and foamy. Now, if you wanted to be like extremely strict carnivore, you could just use the butter and the egg, and that's all you would need. A little pinch of salt, and you're good to go. Because I'm not being super strict right now with this particular recipe, I am going to use, this is 2 teaspoons of vinegar. It's actually probably closer to 1.5. I didn't exactly measure it, but I've done this so many times, I kind of just can do it without measuring. But between 1 and 2 teaspoons, depending on flavor, how you want your mayonnaise to taste. More tangy, less tangy. You can always add a little bit more if there's not enough. So maybe start out with 1 teaspoon, add a second if you feel like you want more tang. I like this kind of amount right here. So I'm just gonna add that on top of my egg yolk. Okay. Then Dijon mustard. I'm just gonna eyeball this. Basically 1 teaspoon is what you want. If it's a little bit more, a little bit less, it's not going to be a big deal, and it is splattering at me. So it's all right. So we're going to put in about 1 teaspoon of Dijon mustard. We're going to make a mess in the process. One moment while I clean it. Okay, got everything clean. I'm just going to take really quickly and just add 1 small pinch of Redmond's real salt. Okay. I will salt this, if need be, more after the mayonnaise is made. The only reason I'm doing it now with at least a little pinch is that salt and the crystals in there actually help the egg to break down faster. This is the same thing if you're whisking egg. It just helps break down the proteins and the little connections within that egg material, the viscous material of an egg. It just breaks it down a little faster, makes it a little easier. Okay, so we have the 1 egg yolk. We have 1 to 2 teaspoons of vinegar, depending on your taste. We have 1 teaspoon roughly of Dijon mustard. Again, you can add more if you like the taste. And then we have 1 small pinch of Redmond salt and 1 stick of melted butter. And now, just for the sake of official information, I can tell you the butter right now is at about 145 degrees. Now that's fairly hot. You'll see a lot of people when they do butter mayonnaise, they actually cool the butter down to room temperature or almost room temperature to where it's still just liquid. I don't want you to do that. I want it to be fairly hot. It's 145 degrees. It's going to slightly cook the egg yolk, not fully, but it is going to add a little bit of heat to it, which is going to change the protein structure. and the fat structure within the egg yolk, and it's going to make it work better, okay? So all I'm gonna do now I'll just walk through this process. I've got my egg white sitting in a bowl here, got my melted butter. I'm gonna take my stick blender, stick it down in here, and on kind of a medium setting, this goes 1 through 12, I have it set on 7 right now. I'm just gonna kind of mix these little ingredients together. So hang on 1 second for me. Okay, so all I'm doing is combining those ingredients, busting up the yolk, incorporating the mustard and the vinegar. And you can see this is why I use this container that only is big enough for the head of the stick blender. I don't want there to be a bunch of extra space, because if there is, it all spreads out and I can't get the stick blender down to it, and then you have to double the recipe. Doing it this way, I can do 1 egg and 1 stick of butter. If you don't have the ability to do that with a stick blender in a small container, do 2 eggs, 2 sticks of butter, and double everything else just normally, and it'll work just fine. Okay, so that is well combined. Now we're going to take the melted butter, and I do this between 6 and 8 pours. Okay, this is where the stick blender really helps. If you're doing this by hand or in a mixer or with a hand mixer, something like that, you may want to drizzle it slower. But with a stick blender, I can kind of just do this a little faster. So I'm going to pour in just a little bit of melted butter, just like that, to get it started. That's probably maybe a couple tablespoons of butter, and we're just going to blend that in and get it really, really thoroughly mixed. Kind of go up and down. It just helps to scrape all that down and get everything mixed in really well. Twist it. Okay, so it's a really soft, kind of looks like scrambled egg. Or not scrambled egg, but like raw egg that's been beaten like I'm about to make scrambled eggs. Kind of has that texture. It's very liquidy. Okay, so we're gonna do the same thing. Pour about the same amount. Okay, a tablespoon or 2, same thing. Okay, 20 or 30 seconds max running the stick blender, and then you can let it rest for a second. That's plenty, it just gets it well incorporated. I'm just gonna keep repeating this process until all of the butter is in here. It takes between 6 and 8 times usually. The last 2 or 3 pours you can do a little heavier because the emulsification has already started by that point, but just don't go too fast because your mayonnaise will split. And if it splits, you can put in another yolk and you can put in then more butter in it, and it becomes a whole process, but then your mayonnaise keeps growing bigger and bigger and bigger until you get it right. So just do it slow from the beginning, and when you learn kind of how fast you can go, you'll get it down and you'll know exactly how to do this. Might take a try or 2, but you can totally do this, okay? So I'm just gonna go ahead and do the rest of this, and then I'll show you what we have. Okay, so I'm about 5 pours in. I've got about 2/3, maybe 3/4 of the butter in there, and it's already starting to get thick, just like mayonnaise. Now it's about the same texture as the mayo that you're gonna get in a jar if you buy it at the store, okay? So I'm gonna put the rest of this in, and then I'm gonna show you what we do additionally so that after you put it in the refrigerator, it stays that same kind of texture or relatively similar so that it's spreadable and works in your recipes. So I'm gonna put the rest of the butter in, and then we'll go from there. Okay, there we have it. That is butter mayonnaise by definition. Okay, and it has a very typical mayonnaise texture, and it's very tasty. And if you spread it on any kind of meat, or if you make like a protein bread type substitute and you spread this on there, it's gonna spread, it's gonna be beautiful, it's gonna taste amazing. And then the problem comes because you put it in the refrigerator, because we're not gonna eat an entire stick's worth of mayonnaise in a single sitting. Maybe you do, but if you're like me, you may not want to do that all the time. So you put it in the refrigerator, and then you go to take it out 6 hours later, the next day, 2 days later, whatever, and it's hard as a rock because all that butter solidifies, and there's really not that much moisture in that egg yolk. It's really mostly fat. so it just doesn't do anything to keep the mayonnaise soft. Now, I love that luxurious texture of mayo that comes in the jar, but I don't love all the seed oils. And those seed oils, even though they're cold, stay liquidy in texture. Their viscosity is very liquidy at that temperature of a refrigerator. So the mayonnaise stays spreadable and soft and has that typical texture. So I really worked to try to figure out what I can do. And so I tried it and I experimented with it, and I was very, very happy and very pleasantly surprised with what it did. So what we're going to do is actually incorporate, now that the mayo is already made, the emulsification is already done. It has been stabilized, and that's why the heat from the butter helps, because it rearranges the proteins and the fats and the different things, and it makes that emulsification a little more stable. It's not cooked like, say, a hollandaise sauce, so it doesn't taste like hollandaise. But it's a little bit more stabilized because that butter was not room temperature, it was warm, and as it emulsified, it brought it closer to being cooked, almost half cooked. It stabilizes it. Now that the emulsification is stable, now when I add the egg white, it is going to thin the mixture out. But because of the proteins that are in the egg whites, it is not going to separate from the rest of the mayonnaise, and it is not going to taste watery. And it's not going to mess with the flavor, because egg white basically has no flavor. Now, if you're weirded out about raw egg white, you can get the pasteurized egg white in a carton. You can buy a sous vide unit, and you can actually pasteurize eggs yourself, whatever it is you would like to do. I'm not too worried about it. I don't have an issue. I don't have any sensitivities to egg whites. If you do, then you may have to use the yolk technique, and I'm sorry if that's the case, but I think most people can handle egg whites fairly well, especially, in something like this in a small amount. I would imagine that unless you're, real sensitive to egg whites, this would be fine. Just take my now already made butter mayo. I've got one egg white, and guess what? It's already in the perfect ratio. You don't need to measure anything out. You don't need to do anything to it. You're just going to take the egg white, dump it in on top of the mayonnaise, which again, this was a typical mayonnaise texture. Watch what happens. I just blended that for maybe 10 seconds. I've got it fairly well incorporated. I'm going to use this stick blender has a turbo button. If yours doesn't, just crank it all the way up on high. If it's only got one setting, that's fine. Just go a little longer. Do about 10 more seconds at a high setting, and you're going to see some little bubbles coming up on top of the egg white. Because what you're essentially doing is starting to whip that egg white, but around the fat. So it's not becoming like a meringue or a whipped egg white like you would make an egg white bread out of. But it is incorporating some air, which, along with the liquid content of the egg white that is bound up by proteins, those two things together make this spreadable. Just make it taste fantastic, and it does not affect the flavor of the other ingredients, other than just to change the texture, which actually allows your palate to then accept that flavor so much better. So I'm going to do it on turbo for 10-15 seconds. And that's it. That seems so simple. And when I tried this the first time, I was like, there's no way that this can be this simple. It really was. So I'm going to take this stick blender out now of this container. I'm going to set it off to the side. I'll just use my little butter dish there. Let me just show you what this actually becomes. I had a mayonnaise texture, right? Just like you would see it in the jar when you buy it at the store. It's exactly what was in here. Now, look what we have. It's this like fluffy, runny, liquidy, almost salad dressing texture, okay? But now remember, this is still warm. So if you're using this room temperature, sure, it may be a little bit runny, but we can't keep it at room temperature because it would go bad. We have to keep it at cold temperatures in the refrigerator. When this sits in the refrigerator, it hardens up, but because of the egg white and all of the protein that is in that egg white binding the water molecules, This will firm up just enough to be a beautiful, fluffy, spreadable butter mayonnaise. And I'm going to show you that texture after it has had some time to sit in the refrigerator. So I'm going to throw a lid on this, I'm going to stick it in the refrigerator, and then we'll come back. I'll show you the actual texture of this. And if you haven't been doing this with your butter mayonnaise or any other kind of mayonnaise you've been making, I bet you're going to start, because it is so nice to take it out of the refrigerator and just have it be usable and have it taste great. Cook things like deviled eggs, completely carnivore deviled eggs, because there's no seed oils, and still have that usable texture of the mayo even straight from the fridge when it's cold. So I'm going to put this in the fridge, and then after it's been in there for long enough to have come down to fridge temperature, I'll show you the texture of it. All right, guys, so here is the butter mayo that we made a little while ago. I set this in the fridge. It's been in there several hours. It is fully cold. It is fully set up, as much as this is going to set up. So I just wanted to show you the texture that you're going to get from this butter mayo with the addition of that egg white. You can kind of see there's like little bubbles that are kind of here on top that are set into that, right? That's an indication of that egg white that has been mixed in there and the little bit of air that we whipped into it. There are smaller bubbles that go all the way through, down through the mayo, and that is part of what helps it to be spreadable. The additional moisture of that egg white also helps it to be spreadable. So just let me show you. It's just the nice, smooth, silky, luscious mayonnaise texture that we would expect to find if it is in a bottle or a jar or any of that stuff at the store, but it's not made with any of those nasty seed oils, right? That right there is perfect mayonnaise every single time. It tastes absolutely delicious, and it's extremely useful because of how spreadable it is. I can easily make deviled eggs. I could spread it on protein bread, put meat on it, do whatever I want. And whether or not you use the mustard and the vinegar, you can make it as carnivore or as loose carnivore as you want, but effectively have 0 carbs and have a fantastic condiment. So there you go. That is spreadable butter mayonnaise. Perfect texture, straight from the fridge. Okay, folks, that's how we make the spreadable butter mayo, spreadable straight from the fridge. My new favorite base condiment for all the other things that I do. I'm gonna take the ingredients I had for the second batch. I'm gonna make a second batch of the butter mayo exactly the same way, and then I'm gonna turn that into my wife's favorite ranch dressing for her keto items, and occasionally I might sneak a little bit of that ranch dressing myself, but very limited. But it's fantastic. It beats anything that comes in any kind of a jar or bottle. I'm going to show you how I make that as well with that second batch. So make sure to stick around, because that video will be coming soon. In the meantime, please make sure to like and share and comment. Let me know you're here. I love talking to you guys. I try to comment back to everyone that I see. If I see your comment, I try to engage in discussion, because I just appreciate the fact you guys are here. I'm just trying to do cool stuff that's inspiring or maybe helpful. I'm sure I'm not the only one who's doing some of these things. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not, but you know, I think it just never hurts to put this information out there and give you guys options of how you can do this and figure out what works for you on your carnivore journey. So that's the spreadable butter mayo, and I really appreciate you guys being here. Make sure to hit the notification bell so you know when I release the ranch dressing video, and let me know what comments or questions you guys have. Let me know if there's a recipe that you'd like for me to try to find a carnivore version of, or see if I can study or make or something, and we'll have some fun. So thank you guys for hanging out with me. This is Chris Cook in Nashville. Eat your meat, love your life. I appreciate you guys. Y'all have a wonderful day.